Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath, Radha Gopinath, Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parishna Stocha Sata Sri Shriman Nirsivan Grace Srila Isi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jai Gaur Premanande Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter number 6, titled The Creation of the Universal Form. Text number 26. Increase the volume. Sattvam chasya vinirbinnam mahandisyam upavisat chitte namsena yena so vijnanam pratipadyate. Sattvam chasya vinirbinnam mahandisyam upavisat chitte namsena yena so vijnanam pratipadyate. Sattvam chasya vinirbinnam mahandisyam upavisat chitte namsena yena so vijnanam pratipadyate. Sattvam chasya vinirbinnam mahandisyam upavisat chitte namsena yena so vijnanam pratipadyate. Satyam chasya vinirbinnam mahandisyam upavisat chitte namsena yena so vijnanam pratipadyate. Word for word translation. Sattvam, consciousness. Cha, also. Asya, of the gigantic form. Vinirbinnam, being separately manifested. Mahan, the total energy. Mahatattva. Disyam, with control. Upavisat, entered into. Chittena amsena, along with his part of consciousness. Yena, by which. Asau, the living entity. Vijnanam, specific knowledge. Pratipadyate, cultivates. Translation. Thereafter, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, the total energy, Mahatattva, entered with his conscious part. Thus the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge. There's no purport. We'll go next text. Text number 27. Srisnu asya daurdhara padbyam kamna bher udapadyata gunanam vritayo yesu pratiyante suradaya. Thereafter, from the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets were manifested, and from his legs, the earthly planets, and from his abdomen, the skies separately manifested themselves. Within them, the demigods and others also were manifested in terms of the modes of mature nature. Text 28. Atyantikena satvena divam deva prapedire dharam raja svabhavena panayo ye chatan anu. Translation. The demigods qualified by the super excellent quality of the mode of goodness are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of their nature in the mode of passion, live on the earth in the company with their subordinates. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 14:14-15, it is said that those who are highly developed in the mode of goodness are promoted to the higher heavenly planetary system, and those who are overpowered by the mode of passion are situated in the middle planetary systems, the earth and similar planets. But those who are surcharged with the mode of ignorance are degraded to the lower planetary systems or to the animal kingdom. The demigods are highly developed in the mode of goodness, and thus they are situated in the heavenly planets. Below human beings are the animals, although some of them mingle with human society. Cows, horses, dogs, etc. are habituated to living under the protection of human beings. The word achantikena is very significant in this verse. By development of the mode of goodness of mature nature, one can become situated in the heavenly planets. But by excessive development of the modes of passion and ignorance, the human being indulges in killing the animals who are meant to be protected by mankind. Persons who indulge in unnecessary animal killing have excessively developed in the modes of passion and ignorance and have no hope of advancing to the mode of goodness. They are destined to be degraded to lower statuses of life. The planetary systems are calculated as upper and lower in terms of the classes of living entities who live there. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksulomaitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, I'll read the translation again of the verse we'll be discussing together with the purport. This is text number 28 of chapter 6 of 3rd canto. The translation again is, the demigods qualified by the super excellent quality of the mode of goodness are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of their nature in the mode of passion, live on the earth in company with their subordinates. So in the purport today, Prabhupada is further elaborating on the text regarding how, based on different living entities' absorption in a particular mode of nature, they become situated in different species of life. For example, Prabhupada is explaining, for those who are in the mode of goodness, they go to the higher planetary systems. They take the body of birth as demigods and they live there. Those who are absorbed in the mode of passion, they stay in the middle planetary system, in the species of human beings. And those in the lower modes of ignorance, they get degraded either to the animal species or to the lower planetary systems. And in the second half of the purport, Prabhupada is elaborating a bit more about the importance of protecting animals. If we go back to a translation again, it's mentioned here in the translation that human beings, because of their nature in the mode of passion, live on earth in the company with their subordinates. So the Sanskrit word for subordinate is anu, which is the last, okay, it's not on the board, but it's the last word in the sloka. It's called anu, which means subordinate. So Prabhupada, he further elaborates on this verse, saying that animals, they are referred to in terms of this word anu, that animals, they are the subordinate to human beings, and generally if someone is subordinate, then it's the duty of that superior person is to take care of them, give them protection, give them shelter, give them mercy. Just like the children, they're subordinate to the parents, so the parents, they have the responsibility to give the children protection, give them comfort, give them mercy, compassion, and bring them up with a lot of love and care. So that's what Prabhupada is mentioning today in the second half of the purport, that this word anu, that the human beings are living on earth with their subordinates, refers to the animals. The animals are said to be the subordinates of human beings, and just like it's the parents' responsibility to take care of their subordinates, their children, or just like it's the teacher's responsibility to take care of his or her subordinates, the students, in the same way, it is the human beings' responsibility to take care of their subordinates, the animal species on planet Earth, and to give them protection. But Prabhupada is saying, nowadays, instead of, due to the excessive modes of passion and ignorance, Prabhupada is mentioning that human beings, instead of protecting their subordinates, the animals. They're instead engaging in killing them by maintaining big, massive slaughterhouses. So many times in Bhagavatam, Prabhupada again and again will hit out on this fact of how human society has degraded so much that now they're innocently killing animals, including our mother cow. And recently I was reading one section of 9th canto, start of 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and in that again there's one very instructive pastime about the importance of protecting animals, how animals, they were so much revered in human society or in Vedic culture. In 9th canto Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami, he starts explaining about the descendants of Vaivasvata Manu. So in 8th canto, he talked about the other Manus, previous to our Manu, our current Manu, his name is Vaivasvata Manu. So in 8th canto, he talked about the other Manus before our current Manu. And in the cantos before, like from 7 to 1, it was mainly pastimes to do with Swambhu Manu. So as he starts talking about the sons of our current Manu, Vaivasvata Manu, he talks about one particular son of Vaivasvata Manu whose name was Prasadra. And this Prasadra, he was a Kshatriya, but unlike other Kshatriyas who would get married, have a wife, have a kingdom, have a big army, he was different. He had taken a special vow. And the vow that he has taken under the guidance of his family guru, Vasistha, was to protect the cows at night time. So this Prasadra, he would, whole of night, he would stay awake, and during the day he would take rest. And Prabhupada mentions in his purport that from this example we can see how important cow protection was in Vedic culture. It was so important, Prabhupada mentions, that there would be a particular class of Kshatriyas. Certain Kshatriyas, they would, unlike the other Kshatriyas who would get married, have a big kingdom, big dynasty, there will be certain Kshatriyas who would take this great vow to every night just stand and guard cows and not do anything else. That was their only duty, to just stand and take guard and protect the innocent cows at night time from ferocious animals like lions and tigers. So that's what this Prasadra was doing. So from this we can understand that Kshatriyas, they're supposed to be such great elevated warrior class of human society, but protecting cows is so important that there will be certain Kshatriyas dedicated in human society in Vedic culture that they won't do anything else, but they will just take this vow that every night they would stand guard and protect the cows. And Prabhupada in his purport explains, because Prasadra had taken this vow that every night I will stay awake, every night I won't go to sleep, and I will protect the cows, because he had taken this vow, one can understand that Prasadra didn't have any descendants. Because to have descendants, one needs to get married to some queen, and at night time then you beget a child. But because this Prasadra, he had taken the vow that every night I will stay awake, I won't go to sleep, I will protect the cows. So there's no question of him becoming married, and there's no question of him begetting children. So for a Kshatriya to take this vow is a very big thing, very great thing. Just like when Bhishma Dev, he took the vow for the sake of his father Santanu that I will never get married. At that time all the demigods, they started shouting, Bhishma, Bhishma, what a terrible vow this person has taken. So for a Kshatriya to take such a vow is considered a very great thing. It's very much against his nature. So, but still, cows were so much revered and worshipped in Vedic culture, animals like cows, that there will be certain Kshatriyas like this who would take this great vow that they won't sleep at night. Every night they would stand guard and protect the cows. So in this way, Prabhupada explains that from this incident we can just see how important cow protection was in Vedic culture. Of course, cows, one time Prabhupada was asked this question, Prabhupada, what is according to you, what do you think is the most beautiful animal? And everyone was thinking that Prabhupada would say it's the cow. But instead Prabhupada said it's the horse. And then devotees asked Prabhupada, but Prabhupada, we were thinking, in your books you're always glorifying cows, how cows are so sacred, how cows are so dear to Krishna. We thought you would say cow, how come you're saying horse? And then Prabhupada replied back by saying, cow is a mother, cow is not an animal. So of course cows we can't classify in the group of animals. It's a mother cow. But at the same time, we can still take this principle that of Vedic culture, that animals, they weren't neglected, they were also given protection in Vedic culture. Prabhupada in his books, he mentions that great Rajas Rishis like Parikshit Maharaj, Yudhishthira Maharaj, in Vedic culture it was the custom that the praja or the citizens didn't only include human beings, but the praja also included animals also. So the animals were also considered as citizens of a particular land or as citizens of a particular city or country. So because the animals are also the citizens of the land, the king would make sure that the animals are given full protection also. That's why it's mentioned when you hear in the Shastras of different Kshatriyas, they go to the forest and they go hunting. Prabhupada, in one of his purports, he explains the purpose of this hunting. One purpose is they're training themselves for actual battle in the future. And Prabhupada writes in his purports that they wouldn't just indiscriminately just kill any animal and everything. But they will go for big ferocious animals just like lions and tigers. And Prabhupada mentions that sometimes in a forest there will be an excessive amount of tigers or lions, excessive amount of ferocious animals. So to maintain the balance between the ferocious animals and the other innocent animals, the Kshatriyas will go and take out the unnecessary number of extra ferocious animals. So in this way the Kshatriyas, they would maintain proper balance in the forest also. So in this way it was the Kshatriyas or the king's duty to also give protection to the animals also. In end of 8th canto also I was reading about Matsya avatar. In that if we read, remember that King Satyavrata was doing tapasya and he finds a fish in his arm when he's picking up water. And the fish asks for protection and the king says, yes, I'll give you protection. Even though it was a fish, still the king is obliged to give him protection because, as Prabhupada explains, in Vedic culture, anything, even if it's not human species, even animal species, bird species, they're all considered as praja, or the citizens of the land, and one needs to give them protection. But Prabhupada is saying in today's purport, now due to the influence of Kali Yuga, it's become completely the opposite. Instead of us protecting the innocent animals, people are exploiting the animals, putting them down, and engaged in maintaining mass slaughterhouses and slaughtering these poor animals. And naturally, so many times in his purports, Prabhupada explained that as a reaction to this, as a reaction to us exploiting the poor animals, we're suffering through all these miseries. And this point is explained in the 4th canto of Bhagavatam. In the section at the start of 4th canto where Narad Muni, he meets Dhruva Maharaj in the forest. Dhruva Maharaj has gone to do tapasya to find Vishnu, and Narad Muni, he bumps into him. And Narad Muni tells Dhruva Maharaj that, you're just a little boy, forget about all this, now's not the time for you to do austerity, you go back home. In this way, Narad Muni gives him different instructions. And in one particular verse, Narad Muni, he explains how if a human being, he doesn't properly deal with different living entities, then as a reaction to that, he will have to face the trident of Durga Devi. So as you know, the trident of Durga Devi represents the threefold suffering. Suffering due to one's mind, suffering due to other living entities, and suffering due to natural occurrences caused by the demigods. So Narad Muni explains to Dhruva Maharaj that if a human being doesn't properly deal with other living entities on different levels, for example, Narad Muni explains you can divide other living entities into 3 categories. There are certain living entities who are lower than you. And then there are certain living entities who are on an equal level with you. And then there are other living entities who are on a higher level than you. Narad Muni explains that the proper way to deal with the entities lower than you is to give them mercy, is to give them compassion. The proper way to deal with persons on an equal level with you is to develop friendship with them. The proper way to deal with persons higher than you is when you see them, you should become happy and pleased to see them. So in this way, Narad Muni explains that a human being, it is his responsibility to deal properly with other living entities, according to these different levels. If a human being doesn't properly deal with his subordinate by giving them mercy, if he doesn't properly deal with his equals by developing friendship with them, if he doesn't properly deal with his superiors by becoming pleased and happy by seeing them, if he doesn't do this, Narad Muni explains, then that human being, he will suffer the threefold miseries. He will suffer the trident of Durga Devi. He will suffer through miseries caused by his mind. He will suffer through miseries caused by material nature. And he will suffer through miseries caused by other living entities. In the purport, Prabhupada explains that the general tendency is that when for living entities who are lower than us, Prabhupada explains, the general conditioned tendency is that we feel a certain sense of pride that, okay, I'm better than these persons lower than me, and we exploit the situation, and instead of showing mercy to these subordinates, we start exploiting them, we start putting them down, and that's what we're seeing now in human society. That the animals who are living entities subordinate to us, instead of us showing compassion to them, as Narad Muni has explained, we're doing the opposite. We're putting them down, we're exploiting them, we're further taking advantage of them and killing them, slaughtering them. So as Narad Muni explains, if you don't properly deal with your subordinates, you will get the trident of Durga Devi. So that's what we're seeing now in current society. Because human beings aren't showing mercy to their subordinates because they're exploiting the animals. Everyone in human society, they're suffering through so much miseries. Miseries caused by the mind. As we see in terms of the diseases in the world, stress, anxiety, mental disorders is one of the top 3 diseases. So everyone is suffering through mental diseases and natural diseases caused by the demigods. Again, we're seeing all around the world so many different natural floods, earthquakes, bushfires, all around the world are raging. And even now we see with the coronavirus, again, these are all karmic reactions, Narad Muni explains, when a human being doesn't properly deal with his subordinates. And then lastly, we have the miseries caused by other living entities. We see how there's so much tension and violence, either due to racism between one country and another, one city and another, one religion and another, and one community and another. So many miseries caused by other living entities also. So in this way, Narad Muni, he explains to Dhruva Maharaj in one very beautiful verse in 4th canto. So the converse is true. For if we properly associate by giving mercy to those lower than us, if we develop friendship with those on an equal level with us, Prabhupada explains, for those who are equal to us, general tendency is when we meet someone who is of our own nature, who is on an equal level with us, instead of developing friendship with them, Prabhupada says that we start becoming very proud and we start boasting that, oh, you know what I did last night, you know what I did last week, or did you see me doing this, or did you see me doing that? So instead of developing mutual friendship and helping each other, Prabhupada explains, conditioned tendencies, one becomes very proud and one starts bragging about his glories when he meets someone on an equal level. And when one meets someone on a higher level than him, instead of becoming very pleased and happy to see, oh, okay, there's such a great person has come, instead of becoming pleased and happy, Prabhupada explains, conditioned tendencies that we become sad, depressed, we become envious. That, oh no, this great person has come, now my position will be lower, this person will get more attention, so in this way one becomes envious and one becomes sad instead of becoming happy. But if Prabhupada explains, Narad Muni explains, if we switch it around and follow what Narad Muni is saying, then Prabhupada explains, we'll always be happy, we'll always be peaceful. So in this way, Narad Muni, he gives this one angle of how to be peaceful, or one angle of how to be happy in this world. If we properly deal with other living entities based on their level, according to what Narad Muni is saying, Narad Muni explains that Durga Devi's trident, the threefold miseries won't affect us. We'll be always happy and peaceful, we'll be blissful, nothing will affect us. So in this way, Narad Muni, he very nicely explains this point in the 4th canto of Bhagavatam. So that's to do with animal killing, about the reaction to that. Now in the first part of the purport, Prabhupada is talking about the demigods, I'll read the translation again. The demigods, qualified by the super excellent quality of the mode of goodness, are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of their nature and the mode of passion, live on the earth in the company with their subordinates. So, if you remember in Vedic cosmology, it's given that there's 3 types of swarga. There is the Bilva swarga, or the swarga or heavenly enjoyment in the lower planetary system. or the subterranean planetary systems, Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Rasatala, Mahatala. And then there is the Bhuswarga, which is the Swarga of our current middle planetary system in Bhumandala. And then there is Divya Swarga, which is the one which is commonly known in Swarga Loka, where all the demigods live. So in terms of the 14 planetary system, we're in the middle planetary system called Bhuloka. Above us there is Bhuvar Loka. And Bhuvar Loka is the Loka where all the ghosts, Rakshasas, all these sort of different living beings live. Then higher than Bhuvar Loka is Swarga Loka. And Swarga Loka is that area where all these demigods live that we're hearing about today, in today's verse. So Indra, Chandra, Surya, Dhruva Loka, all the Sapta Rishis, all the stars, constellations, Mars, Jupiter, all these different planetary systems, all these different planets, these stars, all these devas, demigods, they all live in this Swarga Loka. Then higher than that, obviously, is Mahaloka, Jana Loka, Tapa Loka, and Satya Loka. Now in all these top 4 planetary systems, Mahas, Janas, Tapa, and Satya Loka, different sages and rishis, they live. And the demigods, they don't live there. The demigods, they live in Swarga Loka. So all the demigods, they're in this one region or that planetary system called Swarga Loka. Now in Swarga Loka, there's different grades of demigods. It's mentioned in the Bhagavatam that as we've discussed many times, that in one day of Brahma, there'll be 14 Manus. Each Manu, he'll rule for 71 Divya Yuga. And it's mentioned that every time a Manu changes, the principal demigods will also change. So 71 Divya Yugas, each Divya Yuga is 4.32 million years, and 72 Divya Yugas is 72 times by 4.32 million years. So it's a very long period of time, many millions and millions and millions of years. So not only does every Manu rule for so many millions of years, but it's given that principal demigods such as Indra, Chandra or Agni, all these principal demigods, they also rule for such a vast period of time. Then there is other general demigods or living entities who are living in the Swarga Loka. And these general personalities who are living in the higher planetary systems, they just have a short lifetime, comparatively, of around 10,000 years, generally speaking. But these principal demigods, they are said to, their lifespan is said to be for so many millions and millions and millions of years. And when we speak of demigods and we talk about demigods being immortal, that they've drank the nectar from the Samudra Mandan Leela, they've become immortal. Immortal not in the sense that they never die, but immortal in the sense that whatever their fixed duration of life is, they will live through that full fixed duration life without any death coming upon them. For example, for a human being, their fixed duration life is 100 years. But it's not that it's guaranteed that every human being will live for a full 100 years. Someone might die just at the time of birth, someone might die at the age of 5 years old, someone might die when he's 20, someone might die when he's 30, so there's no fixed. Although we can live for 100 years, we can die any moment. But for the demigods, it's not like that. When the Shastras say the demigods are immortal, it's in the sense that if it's fixed that they'll live for 10,000 years, then during those 10,000 years, they won't die. During those 10,000 years, they will live fully. Or if they're one of the principal demigods like Indra, and they live for a whole Manvantara, which means 4.32 million years times by 71. If they live for so many millions, if they're a principal demigod and their lifespan is calculated to be that long, then death won't come over them during that long period of time. So in that sense, they're called immortal. But after their particular time period is over, then they have to give up the body. Srila Madhvacharya, he explains that these principal demigods who rule for the entire duration of a Manvantara, because for so many millions and millions of years they're engaging in serving the Supreme Lord, because they're engaged in service to Lord Vishnu, because of that, they all go back to Goloka. So even though sometimes in Shastras the demigods are negatively portrayed, that, okay, Indra, he did this blunder, Indra, he did that blunder, or this demigod did this demigod did that. Still, because these principal demigods, they rule for so many millions and millions of years, because they rule for a whole Manvantara, and they do so much service to Vishnu, Srila Madhvacharya explains, for these principal demigods, when they give up their body, For example, when Indra gives up his body after so many millions of years, instead of falling back down, like in Gita, Krishna explains, when one's duration of life in the heavenly planets is over, he falls back down to the earthly planetary system. When Krishna is talking about this, he's talking about the denizens of heaven, like the general denizens of heaven, not the principal demigods. Madhvacharya explains that these principal demigods, like Indra, when their time is up, when they have to give up their body, instead of going back down, they rise to Satyaloka, and they go to Satyaloka, and then from Satyaloka, they go back home, back to Goloka Vrindavan. So this is the case for these principal demigods, Madhvacharya explains. Then on the other hand, we have these other general living entities who are living in Swargaloka, who in general is said to have a lifespan of 10,000 years. For them, after their lifespan of 10,000 years is over, after their punya is over, then it's given, then these are the persons who fall back down to planet Earth. And when they fall down, it's literally they fall down from the sky and they start falling down to the middle planetary system, Bhuloka. So going back to the different levels, as we know, Bhuloka is the middle planetary system where we're situated, and after Bhuloka is Bhuvarloka, where all the ghosts and Rakshasas live. Then it's Swargaloka, where all the demigods live. So when a particular denizen or inhabitant of the heavenly planet, when he falls down, as he's falling down to Bhuloka, he has to go through Bhuvarloka. Bhuvarloka is in between our planetary system and the heavenly planetary system. And where does Bhuvarloka start? Sukadev Goswami explains that our present planetary system, the middle planetary system, it, vertically speaking, it goes till the extent that the eagles can fly. So as high as the eagle can fly in the sky, that's the upper limit of Bhuloka. After that, vertically speaking, going upwards, that's from that point onwards is Bhuvarloka, where all the ghosts and Rakshasas live. So when these inhabitants of the heavenly planets, their time is up in the heavenly planets, their punya is up, and they are falling down to planet Earth, or they're falling down to Bhuloka, as they're going through this Bhuvarloka, where all the Rakshasas and ghosts live, it's given in the Shastra that these ghosts and Rakshasas, they attack these denizens of heaven who are falling down, and they eat his gross body. And after his gross body is eaten and he continues falling down, then it's just the soul and the subtle body. And it falls down into Bhuloka. And it's given in the Shastra that the soul doesn't directly fall into Bharatvarsha, like the current planet Earth, directly. But before it comes to Bharatvarsha, it falls into one of the other areas of Bhuloka, where it can continue enjoying for a bit more time. So as we were explaining before, there's three types of Swarga. There's the Swarga of the subterranean planets, which is called Bilva Swarga, and then there is Bhu Swarga. So even in our middle planetary system, there are certain areas in Bhuloka where one can also enjoy heavenly opulences. And then there is Divya Swarga, which is where all the demigods live. So before coming to Bharatvarsha, first the demigod, as he's falling down, he gets attacked by ghosts and Rakshasas in Bhuvarloka. His gross body gets eaten up. Then his soul and subtle body, it falls into one part of Bhuloka, and it falls as rain, it's mentioned. So the subtle body along with the soul, it enters into a cloud, and then that particular denizen of the heavenly planet, it falls as rain to Bhuloka, and then it becomes, after falling down, it grows as grass, and then based on its karma, it gets eaten by a male, even a male animal or a male human being, according to its karma, and then in this way, it takes birth in the middle planetary system. So it's given, for example, 90% of whatever punya or pious activities he would have done, he would have exhausted in the Swarga Loka. Then whatever remaining little pious activity or credits he has, like 10%, he will finish that off in one part of Bhuloka, where there's heavenly enjoyment. Then after that last remaining punya is also over, then he'll come and take birth in Bharatvarsha. So in this way, the description is given in Shastra of life in the heavenly planets, so Swarga Loka. And the Shastras, they don't condemn demigods in the sense that demigods, they're all devotees of Vishnu. So in that sense, the Shastras explain we should give respect and worship the demigods as great devotees of Vishnu. But the thing that's condemned in the Shastras is human beings desiring or endeavoring to go to the heavenly planets. That's the thing that's condemned. And Krishna, he talks about this in Uddhava Gita. So recently we were discussing on Saturday. There's one chapter in Uddhava Gita where Krishna is telling Uddhava about the philosophy of Kama Mimamsa. Krishna is telling Uddhava, okay, so far I've talked to you about the principle of bhakti, but there are certain atheistic class of persons who don't follow these principles of bhakti and who instead propagate this philosophy of karma mimamsa, which says that work is everything. You just simply do good karma, you just simply do your moral duties, you just do good punya, do good nice moral activities, be a good man, be a good woman. Do your nice moral duties and everything will be alright. If you do good work, if you work hard, if you work sincere, then automatically happiness will come, automatically everything will go right in your life. So this is a philosophy, Krishna explains, of certain atheistic class of people going with this philosophy of Kama Mimamsa propounded by the philosopher named Jaimini Rishi. And then Krishna, he will give different arguments refuting this philosophy of fruitive victory, refuting this philosophy of karma. In one of these arguments, Krishna explains that according to this Kama Mimamsa philosophy, they're saying, okay, you do punya, you do good work, and in this way you enjoy. And Krishna says, say for argument's sake, okay, you do good punya and everything goes right, you don't do any mistakes, you've accrued a lot of pious activity, you go to heavenly planets. Krishna explains that firstly, while you're in this material world, you won't enjoy fully. Krishna explains that if we observe all around us, you'll see there are so many people working hard, but they're not enjoying fully. Krishna explains that the enjoyment they're getting is just very flickering. It's just a tiny bit of pleasure they're getting, and on the other hand, there's a lot of distress. Just like yesterday, we were discussing one verse from the Bhagavatam, where Prahlad Maharaj is saying that sense gratification is like an itch. Initially, when you scratch an itch, you get some pleasure. But if you keep scratching, actually, as you're scratching, you're not actually experiencing real pleasure, you're actually causing harm to your own self. So in this way, the Shastras explain, when we engage in sense gratification, there will be an initial pleasure, but that pleasure is actually illusory. Just like when you scratch an itch, you'll be feeling some pleasure, but actually, that's not real pleasure. Because actually what you're doing, you're just hurting your own body. You're causing a scar to your own body. So in this way, the Shastras explain that material happiness is not actual happiness, it's all illusory. And the result of engaging in sense gratification is you'll get more misery. So in this way, Krishna explains to Uddhava that the so-called happiness these karmis are explaining is very temporary, is very short-lived, and instead they're experiencing so much distress. Then Krishna says, say for argument's sake, these Kama Mimamsas, they say, okay, life in this Bhuloka is tough, life in Bharatvarsha is tough, we work hard, we only get a little happiness, but I'll do punya and I'll go to the heavenly planets. I'll do punya, I'll go to Swargaloka. In Swargaloka, I'll enjoy very nicely. Then Krishna, he refutes that. He says, no, even if you go to Swargaloka, you'll still experience unhappiness. Krishna explains to Uddhava that happiness in this middle planetary system is tainted by greed, is tainted by envy, is tainted by pride, is tainted by this and that. And Krishna explains in the same way, just like happiness in the middle planetary system is contaminated by so many anarthas, in the same way Krishna explains, happiness in the higher planetary systems is also contaminated by these lower qualities like anger, envy, greed, and so on. So even if you go to heavenly planets, you still won't enjoy fully. And we see many examples of this in the Shastra. Like throughout Bhagavatam, we see how demigods, they go through so many troubles in their lives. Some very vivid or graphic examples of this we can see in 9th canto of Bhagavatam. For example, 9th canto, there's the story of Soma. He is the demigod of the moon, and in 9th canto of Bhagavatam it's explained he was so much blinded by lust that he goes and kidnaps the wife of his own Guru Maharaj. So he goes and abducts the wife of his own spiritual master Brihaspati, and he begets a child through the wife of his own Guru Maharaj. So such a thing, even in the middle planetary system, is considered, even in our current society, will be considered as so degraded as something completely unthinkable. But even such crazy things, Bhagavatam explains, is going on in the heavenly planetary system. So it's not that if we go to the heavenly planetary system, one can just enjoy nicely and nothing will happen. But no, even these crazy things like this also happen in the heavenly planetary system. So in this way, Krishna, he refutes going to the heavenly planets. Another thing Krishna explains to Uddhava is, Krishna tells Uddhava in one verse that even if one lives for the lifespan of Brahma, which is 311 trillion years and 40 billion years. 311 trillion plus 40 billion years. Even if one has a lifespan as large as Brahma, 311 trillion years, even if he lives for that long, still he will be overcome by the fear of death. So even one goes, in this way Krishna explained, even if you go to heavenly planets, still the fear of death will always be there. And at any point of time, I will burn out my punya and I have to fall down. And that thought will always be lingering in your mind. And in this way Krishna explains, how can you enjoy fully when you know that death will come upon you? And Krishna explains, even if you live for as long as Brahma, still this fear of death won't go away. Still you'll be constantly thinking, oh no, in the future sometime death will come, in the future I will have to leave this world and I have to go somewhere else. That fear will always be lingering in your mind. And as long as that fear of death will be there in your mind, how can you enjoy? And the disciples of Prabhupada, in the purports, they give the example, it's just like someone is there with an axe behind you, and you don't know when, but this person with the axe, anytime, can just come down and chop your head off. Or the disciples of Prabhupada, they give the example of a snake. You're in your house, and there's a snake there, and you don't know when the snake or the cobra will come and bite you and kill you. So in this way, the disciples of Prabhupada explain, if you know that there's a man right next to you with an axe ready to chop off your head, if you know that there's a snake right next to you ready to bite you, how can you actually enjoy life? How can you peacefully sit and eat nice food? How can you peacefully sit and watch TV? How can you peacefully enjoy family life, do this or do that, when you know that there's a guy right there with an axe in his hand, and any time you can die? So in this way, the disciples of Prabhupada, they give this very vivid example to help us understand how this is what even the demigods go through. Even though they live for such a long period of time, even though Brahma lives for 1,000 Divya Yugas, for so many trillions of years, even Brahma is overcome by this fear of death, by this fear of time. Of course, if the Brahma is a devotee of the Lord, as our Brahma is, then he won't be overcome by the fear of death. For devotees, they don't fear death, they don't fear time, because time is Krishna. Because they're surrendered lotus feet of Krishna, they're fearless. So in this way, Krishna, he gives these arguments of why we shouldn't desire to go to heavenly planet system. Because whatever enjoyment, temporary enjoyment or enjoyment tainted with anarthas we're experiencing here, it's the same tainted enjoyment you'll get in the heavenly planet system. It's the same thing, there's no difference. And secondly, it's temporary. And thirdly, at one point of time, death will come and you'll completely finish it off. And because that fear of death is constantly there, they can't fully enjoy. So in this way, the Shastras, they put down the desire to go to the heavenly planet systems. So the demigods themselves aren't condemned. The demigods are said to be great devotees of the Lord. As we're discussing these principal demigods, Madhvacharya explains, because of their service to the Lord, they all actually go back home, back to Goloka. But to approach the demigods, understanding them as the Supreme Personal Godhead, to approach them for fruitive benefits, to approach them with the desire to go to the planet, that's what's condemned in the Shastra. Okay, we'll stop here. Is there any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
You mentioned about the class of Kshatriyas to protect the house. So, what is the difference between the protection Kshatriyas and the worship of the processes Krishna or Kshat? The worship is also in protection. Is there a different type of protection?
The role of the Kshatriyas in this case was to protect. Prabhupada writes in the purport that he was protecting the cows from ferocious animals like tigers and lions. So for these big ferocious animals, like a Kshatriya is needed, someone with a sword. So in that case, if the community or the cows are living in such a dangerous part, then one needs the help of some warrior class to have a sword in hand to protect them. Vaishyas, they give protection in the sense they take care of the cows. They, as we see in Krishna Lila, they have to go out for grazing the cows, take them to different pasturing grounds. In this sense, they give protection. But in this case, it's given that they were living in an area where there were a lot of dangerous animals. So to protect the cows from these dangerous animals, Prasadra, he was instructed by his Guru Maharaj, and he personally took that vow upon himself to protect the cows from these ferocious animals. So, yeah, in that sense, he was given Bhagavad. Okay, thank you. Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jaguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanande.